Shalom, and welcome to the Parsha Pod. I'm Rav Mordechai Rosenberg, here with Rav Menachem Leibtag, and we are talking Torah together.
We haven't moved since last week. No, we're recording 2 weeks in a row, so this won't be away. Okay.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it's time to learn. And this week we're doing Parsha Emor. So, Parsha Emor starts with a whole bunch of laws about the Kohanim. And they've got a lot of limitations on how they can become tamei and who they can marry. And I was wondering, why have a whole class of people called the Kohanim or the Leviim even? Like, why not just, we have a concept of a king who is sort of selected and then they have a dynasty. But we also have a much more kind of palatable idea of the Nevi'im that are selected each time they're worthy, selected by God.
I read
we
someone
have people doing other jobs. Like why have this like dynasty that generates into this caste of people that serve as the Kohanim?
Last year in Shul, someone came up with a very similar question. His name was Korach. Remember? As we're all at Sinai, we're all separate, we're all kadosh. Remember? So what makes you special?
Listen, I don't have a problem with there being Kohanim.
You know what happened to him?
Yeah. I don't have a problem with people serving a specific function. The society is filled with people that do specific functions.
Yeah, but why is it limited to one tribe?
Yeah. And why does somebody who wants to be a Kohen and might be worthy, not like Korach who's unworthy, but somebody who is worthy, why are we limiting it to one tribe?
So I'll begin quoting the Rambam. Mm-hmm. He talks about Shevet Levi.
Yeah.
And he talks about that after all these laws of Shevet Levi and and what we give them and the Masrot, etc., he says anyone, in fact, the whole yeshiva world is based on this famous Rambam, anyone who wants to take the mantle of education and to study Torah and teach Torah has a din of Shevet Levi, and he has special privileges. Now, because he takes upon himself responsibility. I want to flip your question around. Right? Anyone who wants to take that responsibility of education and teaching and be like a Navi, being a spokesperson of God, to be learned and to teach and to instruct and to help, you're allowed to. No one's stopping anyone from being involved in education and teaching. But to make sure there's always educators, right? I want to make sure that one entire tribe of Israel is stuck in education, has nothing else they can do. And therefore I don't give them land. Now what God's separating the entire tribe of Levi to ensure there's always educators. We know the education problem today. It's hard to find good educators. Right? We know if you worked in a school, every principal, if you find a principal and then go find a principal who's going to find teachers, it's hard to find educators because people would rather make a living. It's no job for a Jewish boy. So the fact that I'm taking an entire tribe, like almost a tenth of our population, and they're dedicated to Torah study and teaching Torah and being judges and officiants, etc. It's all in Sefer Dvarim. It's Kohanim Levim, Shevet Levi, and they're carrying the Torah around and teaching. They teach the Torah to the rest of the tribes. That's the idea of Kedusha we talked about, that God separates a tribe to teach Torah to the rest. Now, on top of that, temple worship is dangerous. We've been talking about that a lot, because people might think that if I do this ritual, I can buy God off. Again, that danger of being a consumer, that I can bring this korban and buy God off. Now, I can bring a korban, has to be educational and transformative, has to come with education. What God is saying, I want to limit service in the temple to the educators. Okay? I'm flipping around. I'm not saying first there's Kohanim and they also teach. The main job of Kohanim is to be teachers and educators and civil servants, and to make sure they're funded by what's called Master Rishon. 10% of our produce goes to Shevet Levi. That funds them. That's their salary. So I have to build, and they're not funded by the government. They're funded by the people. It's a beautiful system, but I always have educators. And then I say, especially after Chet HaEgel, God says, you know what? It gets dangerous when the people are doing their own, having their own party there with the Korbanot. What happened with Chet HaEgel? It got a little too wild. Says, you know what? At that time, God separates Shevet Levi. I'm going to limit service in the temple to the educators to make sure that the temple doesn't get out of hand. By itself, it gets out of hand anyhow because the tribe of the Kohanim become corrupt. That's the end of Beit Rishon. It happens in the second temple as well. But I'm saying it's not, they're special people and they get more privileges. They have more responsibility. But I think Chumash is limiting temple service because it needs to make sure it doesn't get out of hand.
So the people that should know best are the educators, and so therefore they are the ones that are allowed to do this somewhat dangerous.
Because when charlatans take over the shul and take over the religion and start promising things, with magic and things like that, then it leads to corruption. And just read the paper.
Right. Okay. I hate to be annoying about this, but I think a lot of people don't really see the Kohanim as educators. They see them as these kind of religious priests. Can you point to specific places where it's clear that is a part of their role? Or
we have in Divrei Yamim, we have it in Lachim when Chizkiyahu does his reform, whenever there's a big reform. So Shevet Levi goes around teaching. Now, Chumash or Navi is not about everything happening in day-to-day life. Nevi'im is a book about what went wrong and how we're supposed to learn from our mistakes. So we only hear about the bad things we did and how the Nevi'im rebuked the people. But what was happening day to day we don't know about, but we know from Chumash that's what they're supposed to be doing. In the blessings, the main thing, when in the blessings where every tribe gets their job and their function, the tribe of Levi, Yoru Mishpatecha Yaakov, it's their job to teach Yaakov, the Torah Israel.
Okay, that is.
And then Yesiba, they also bring Torah.
Yoru Mishpatecha Yaakov, you will teach laws to
the last line in Malachi, Kisifte Kohen Yishmru Dat, B'Torah Mefakshu Mipiu. We read that, Malachi, was that Shabbat HaGadol, I think.
Right.
Ki Malach is sent by God to teach. And I think it's a wonderful system. Again, you would think you hear more about it. And unfortunately, it didn't work so well either because they also became corrupt.
Right. But
that's the Nevi'im are there to fix it. Nevi'im can be from any tribe.
Right. I see. Okay. So we need them to be educators. We need them to make sure that people aren't trying to just buy God.
In Sefer Dvarim, we're told that Shevet Levi carries the Aron HaBrit. Now, I don't need a whole tribe for thousands of years, right, to carry the Aron because the Aron, the idea of the Mishkan was temporary, just for the desert. You were supposed to come and build a permanent house. I don't need Shevet Levi to carry the Aron and thousands of people, a whole tribe to carry the Aron. But when Chumash says your job is to carry the Aron, it means you're carrying the burden of teaching, carrying the Aron, keeping the Aron HaBrit, with the Torah inside. I think it's a symbolic way of saying the job of Shevet Levi is to carry the burden of teaching Torah, and transmitting that from generation to generation. When you go to the Kohen, you have to go to the Shofet or to the Kohen. To make sure there's always Shoftim who know the laws, I separate a whole tribe for that.
I see. Okay. So next question about the Kohanim is that the Kohen is not allowed to have a physical blemish.
He's allowed to have. He says he can't work. He has all the privileges. If something happens, like I just cut my finger also, if something, if an accident happens, cutting potatoes or whatever you do, or you tripped or you broke your leg, so you're temporarily out of service. If it's a permanent home, because the temple service has to be respectful. And that's the way people are. People like, things looking nice, called etiquette and things like that. Now, we don't take away any privileges. A Kohen who has a blemish has all the privileges, gets all the food. But in the temple service, we want the temple service to be like in any top firm. At the reception desk, or the people on stage have to look good. Look how much money we put into what's called ipur, makeup and setting and making sure. And so don't tell me that that's not important to people. So you want the temple to be a schlumpy, but I don't know what the word for schlumpy is. You want to be. You're not British. You're from Australia, but you know what British means. Things have to be, like Buckingham Palace.
Right.
That's what the temple should be like.
Okay, fair enough. So,
but again, we're not taking away any privilege from them. We're talking about the service has to be respectful.
I see. Okay, gotcha. Next is the Chagim, and after Chagim we get the shemen, zait, zach for the olive oil for the menorah, and the lechem apanim, the showbread for the table. So, I was wondering. Both of these things seem surprisingly out of place, especially the olive oil and the showbread. I mean, we seem to have stopped talking about the goings on of the Mishkan, and we're suddenly jumping back into it. Why weren't these things taught earlier?
So I think the answer is I call the answer number 7.
Okay.
Follow parsha Emor and follow the number 7.
Okay.
So we have Moedei Hashem. We begin with these are the appointed times, set times to meet God. Remember, Oel Moed is the tent of meeting. Moedei Hashem are times that we meet God.
Yep.
So Moed doesn't mean time. Moed means the shorish is vad, to meet. So we meet God, like a vad is a committee. A vida is a conference.
Right.
So as a time to meet God is a Moed.
Right.
Moedei Hashem. And therefore, on a regular basis, we have to encounter God. But Chumash, we learned already beforehand, on the 3 critical times of the agricultural year, in the Aviv, the beginning of the spring when our grain harvest begins, at the end of the grain harvest, 2 months later, Chag HaKatzir, at the end of our fruit harvest, in the beginning of the rainy season, right? Those are the critical times because we need food.
Yeah.
And our prosperity and our lives are basically based on that output. Ancient Canaanites believed in, remember, rain god, fertility god, the grain gods, etc. And bring them sacrifices and they'll give you grain.
Yeah.
Chumash says, no, keep the laws of Parshat Mishpatim, keep the laws of the Torah, act properly, do a good job serving me, and I'll bless your land. We say every day in Shema.
Right.
But come to the temple to remember that I'm judging you based on your deeds.
Okay.
Now, there's something beautiful in, we'll see in a minute, in the holidays, how this idea comes across. Because first we have the Moedim, and then before the Moedim start, all the Moedim have a lunar date, pretty much.
Yeah.
They have a month. That's the first time we have the holidays with their lunar dates. Beforehand, Shosh Regalim were just the agricultural time of the year because it has nothing to do with the moon. It has to do with the seasons and the sun. Therefore, they're seasonal. But I need a calendar, so I need a date. Now, and therefore, we decide when Rosh Chodesh is, and therefore, actually, we call out the Moed. Therefore, we decide what day Rosh Chodesh is, or we decide what day Yom Tov comes out.
As in, you're explaining now why the Chumash uses the word
Asher Tikru Otam B'Moadam.
Yeah.
But in contrast to Shabbat, therefore, before I start the Moedim, I begin with Shabbat, which has nothing to do with the moon. It's just every 7 days. And then I go back, Elam Moedei Hashem and Pasuk Dal, these are the Moedim.
Right.
And you talk about that every Friday night at Kiddush. Because when you praise the Sabbath day, you're saying Shabbat is Zecher L'Maseh Breshit, that's the 10 Commandments in Shemot. It's Zecher L'Yitzat Mitzrayim, 10 Commandments in Devarim. And it's Tchilah L'Mikrei Kodesh, it introduces the Moedim in Parsha Emor.
Right.
We all know that phrase by heart, but a lot of us don't realize what it's referring to.
Right.
So Tchilah Mikrei Kodesh is Parsha Emor.
Yeah.
Which means Shabbat overrides the holidays. Because remember, you can cook on Yom Tov, but you can't cook on Shabbat. Right. So maybe if Yom Tov comes out on Shabbos, I can cook, it'd be great. Right. No, you can't. It's the Ramban on the spot, on why we begin with Shabbat beforehand. I see. It's sort of a parenthetical, but you can't keep Shabbat, and then you have Yom Tov. Now, but Shabbat is every 7 days.
Yeah.
Remember, 6 days work, and the 7th day Shabbat. Chag HaMatzot, first, how many days?
7 days.
7 days, eat matzah. Got it?
Yep.
Then we count the weeks. Remember, seven times 7 weeks.
Yep.
Seven times 7, which goes with our grain harvest. Got that?
Yeah.
That's clear. And we have the holiday of Shavuot. And then we have the 7th month, and we dedicate the whole 7th month to God on the first day of the month. What we call Yom Zikaron. Remember that God's our boss. Yeah. It's called Zichron Torah. We blow shofar to remember that God judges us or that we're in His service. The 10th day of that month is Yom Kippur, to remember God's attributes of mercy. And then we have a 7-day holiday called Sukkot, which is celebrating the end of our grain harvest. And the 8th day is special. It closes up the holidays, called Leicirat, closure. And I worry about upcoming rainy season, which I'm being judged for. The 7th month is the end of last year and the beginning of next year. But number 7 is all through the parsha. Right. When that's all, and it's all agriculture. Yeah. It's everything's agriculture. The whole 7 weeks of Sfirat Omer is from the beginning of the grain harvest to the end. Yeah. The end of our fruit harvest, B'chag Asiv.
Right. I got sorry, I just missed. Why is the dates important? You said this is the first time that the dates are mentioned.
Because a society needs a calendar. Right. And who runs the calendars? The church. Or the shul. Then religion runs the calendar.
I see.
Remember the Gregorian, it's Pope Gregory, the Gregorian calendar. Remember? Okay. That's why do we call it the Gregorian calendar? Because the church had to set the calendar. Now they were running the show because they're the Roman Empire. I see.
So
and everyone has to keep
the same. Talking about the Mishkan and the Kohanim set the dates.
Yeah, because we have to have, that's the job of Beit Din. That's the first mitzvah of Chodesh Lechem. Start counting your month, but you decide when the month is. Right. When Rosh Chodesh is. So you don't have too much leeway. Okay. It's either 29 or 30 days in a month, but we decide what day is Rosh Chodesh. But we have to have a calendar of what day the holidays come out exactly. Now but notice the number 7. And when all the holidays are over, I have the menorah, right?
Right.
Which is every day.
Every
Right?
single day, yeah.
Every day, the menorah from olive oil. See why it's olive oil in it. And then we have lechem hapanim, the lechem hapanim, which is every Shabbat.
As in we switch it every Shabbat.
So we began with Shabbat, and now we end with Shabbat.
Yeah.
Chapters 23 and 20. So we sort of close up.
Okay.
Now, it's all about agriculture. Now,
It's about agriculture.
now, the agricultural season begins with barley, then grain, the first of the seven, it's not by chance there's 7 species.
Right.
You can answer that. There's always, the number 7 is everywhere, ever since day one, ever since creation,
Yeah.
because 7 reminds us that all the powers of nature are from one God.
Okay.
So whenever there's something that relates to nature and the fear that we might think there's many gods, we bring in number 7 to remember there's one God who creates all the powers of nature.
As
Down
in,
the
like,
line.
As in, like, the 6 represent nature, and then the 1 is like God that is
No,
controlling
no,
all of them?
7, the number 7,
Yeah.
that God made nature, and therefore I separate one day a week to remember that, to remember God every day of the week. There's another 6
It's
days.
kind of like the
But-
6 days of creation,
Yeah,
and
and
the
then 7th day is Shabbat.
and the 7th day of Shabbat.
That's the
when
question,
Hashem
are there
said
6 days of creation or 7?
Right.
So God's creative 6 days, but creation ends by stopping creativity
Right.
and remembering who gave you creativity.
Right.
So in that way, the 7th, if I don't have a day to sit back and reflect, you always need to take a break to reflect, to be creative.
I see.
So that's why the number 7 ties everything together. And then in the agricultural season, so the grain harvest is over, Shavuot, then starts the fruit harvest. We have the tainim, the figs and the dates, and then the grapes. And finally, the last season will be olives. And olive season goes till October, almost till Hanukkah time. And that's why when all the holidays are over, after Chag Asif, then we have the olive oil for the menorah. Shemen Zayit Zach, the menorah. Almost copy-paste from Parsha Tetzaveh. And then we conclude with every Shabbat switching the lechem hapanim.
Wow. Okay. So let me just see if I've got this. The reason that we're ending off with the menorah is that the menorah is essentially like an olive oil korban, and it's like a sacrifice of the oil.
Yeah, it's Hanukkah after Sukkot, pretty much.
Right. It's like to say, well, it's the last of the harvest, and then we don't. The way to sacrifice, the way to offer up olives is not by kind of, I don't know, slaughtering them. The way it is by turning them to oil and
giving light. And light in Torah, light represents teaching Torah.
Right.
And it's every day.
Right.
And we light them on every holidays, once in a blue moon, once in a new moon.
Right.
But the lighting the menorah every day, because the main avodah of the temple is giving light.
Right. Well, whereas we have our Hanukkah festival at the end,
at the very end of the oil
harvest
harvest season. It's not by chance. That's why Hanukkah is when it is.
That's fascinating. And then, but then we have the parallel to the daily sacrifice of the oil with the weekly sacrifice of the bread, which is kind of like the
That reminds us of the manna again. Remember,
Right.
God providing. Remember, the manna is the 7th day. The first time we have a week, and
Yeah.
we're taking double on Friday.
Yeah. So that bread is both symbolic of the 7 as well as the tying together of the agricultural cycle on a weekly basis. Nice.
And using the number 7 ties everything to, and the idea of a week ties everything to God. And therefore, the first chapter of Chumash sets the stage for the rest of Chumash pretty much.
Right. Okay.
That idea that I always need to remember that God is behind the powers of nature. There's one God who made them all.
Yeah.
And who judges us based on our deeds. It's so fundamental to Judaism.
Yeah.
And it's so anti-idol worship. And that's why I don't think it's not emphasized enough in education, because sometimes when we misunderstand the rituals, they become idol worship.
Right.
You go into consumer mode and I can do this ritual and God will give me this and that. Now, I need the rituals to remember that God judges me based on my deeds. I have to learn the Torah and know how to act. Now, you can argue how to act, and that's already different. That's a question of, how you understand halakha. But the key principle, that's a mega theme through Chumash.
Right. Okay. So, in the middle of all these chagim.
Oh yeah. So I want to close.
Yeah.
Shavuot is awesome.
Okay.
Because the famous thing. What happens? What do we do on Shavuot? We begin our grain harvest with the Omer, with the barley, and we wave it, and we count the weeks, not just the days. We've been doing this. We're doing Sphira now. We're starting. And then after 7 weeks, we can bring chametz to the temple. That's what's called the famous Shtei Lechem, and we bring a korban shlamim. The only time that the tzibur, remember the tzibur brings a chatat, a sin every holiday. The only time the nation of Israel, called the Korban Tzibur, brings a Korban Shlamim is on Shavuot. It's called Kif Setzer. If you know Ezil Mekoman, Zivche Sham Tzibur Vashamot, remember where you sprinkle the blood? In Ezil Mekoman, we say at the end of Korbanot in the morning, for those who say it. So there's only one time a year that the Tzibur brings a Shlamim. Why? It's crazy, right? Why on Shavuot? And that's the most beautiful hint that Shavuot relates to Matan Torah, because when we said Nasa B'Nishma at Har Sinai, we brought Olot and Shlamim.
Right.
Now, the only other time the Tzibur brought a Shlamim was on Yom HaShmini, when the Shekhinah returned to the Mishkan. That was a couple of weeks ago, Parshat Shmini. But they bring a Chatat Olah and Shlamim. So the Yom HaShmini Korban inaugurating the temple, right? We copy most of that service on Yom Kippur. Remember? We had the Chatat Olah of Aron, Chatat of the people. But on Yom HaShmini, the people also brought Chatat Olah and a Shlamim. Remember, V'shorayav l'Shlamim, Nizbach l'Hashem, ki hayom nirad lechem. I can't bring a Shlamim on Yom Kippur because it's Yom Kippur, you can't eat. And therefore, the Shlamim moves back to Shavuot. And therefore, if I take that Yom HaShmini, the day of the Shekhinah, with a special Korban, most of it I do on Yom Kippur because that enables our relationship, because of God's attributes of mercy. But the Shlamim I save for the anniversary of the first Luchot of Shavuot.
Is that because it's like the joyous part of that whole experience? Right.
Because we're at the end of a process. Our grain harvest is over. We come out of Egypt. The end of the process coming out of Egypt is over, and we receive the Torah, and we enter a covenant.
Right.
So it could be now. Bottom line.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there any connection between the Omer itself? Like we today connect the Omer to Shavuot, but like the Omer as it was in the days of the Torah and those first years, is that also connected to Matan
Read
Torah
Parsha
as well?
B'Shalach. The word Omer is special. Remember Ayin Mem Resh?
Right.
That was the measure,
or
the utensil they used to collect the manna. And when the people complained for food, remember later, what replaces the manna is going to be our grain.
Yeah.
And therefore, for the 7 weeks of our grain harvest, right, we talk about Omer because Omer reminds us of the man. Remember, what are we saying? We're saying that we're treating our own harvest that we do on our own as though it's lechem min hashamayim.
Right.
We say lechem min haaretz. But God brought us lechem min hashamayim. And remember in chapter 16 in Shmot, verse 4, okay, God says, Ani mamtir lechem lechem min hashamayim. And the people go out to take Yom Yom. Leman anaseno hayelech b'toroti imlo. I'm going to test them or train them, will they follow my Torah or not. The original training to receive the Torah, 3 weeks before we get the Torah, we need a process of training where you follow my laws. And the whole manna experience, which is our first week, collect for 6 days. Collect for 6 days. On the 7th day, you can't. Take double on Friday, but you can't take on Shabbat. The original training to receive the Torah is the manna experience, which was centered around the word Omer. Remember? Omer la gogolet, mishpar nafsotechem.
Right. Take as much as
you need,
Omer.
as much. Make as much as you need, as much as you want. You took too much, you got rotten. Take double on Friday, but you can't take on Saturday.
And I suppose that's the message for our grain harvest as well.
Because and it's right in Parshat Emor. Why? Because in verse we start with the Omer, then we have 7 weeks, and we have the lechem, and together with meat, with the kipset, with the shlamim, we wave it, and then we say on that day, mikar kodesh lechem, don't do any work, we end Shavuot on verse 21. And verse 22, we copy paste the pasuk from Parshat Kedoshim. It says, we have a law, not a holiday. When you're harvesting your field, copy paste from chapter 19, verse 9 in Kedoshim to you. We had that already. Repeating it. Why? Because how do you show God, I'm thankful for my grain harvest? As you're harvesting your grain for these 7 weeks, don't forget there's people who don't own land. Laniva, there's the poor person, the stranger, the Levite, etc. People who don't own land, keep them in mind. I have to hoard during those 2 months because I need that food, that grain for the whole year. So I have to keep for myself, but always remember. Now, what's so beautiful about it? In ancient times, during your grain harvest, you would bring a sacrifice. You would feed the grain god, right? Said hopefully he would give you a good grain system. God's telling you, wave this Omer, do something symbolic to remember, feed the needy, right? And God will bless your grain. We say that every day in Shema, don't we? If you follow my laws, right? But be careful, don't go astray. Then I'll stop it. God's watching our prosperity. That's a function of our deeds.
Yeah.
So the way we're worthy of having a good grain harvest is by being like Boaz.
Mm-hmm.
We have the word Omer again. Remember, she takes Omerim. And that's where we read that on Shavuot.
Nice.
And then that's such a beautiful ending of the Omer section in Parsha Emor. The copy of there. And therefore we don't feed God, we feed the needy. And that gives us worthy of God helping us.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Which is the same idea we had from Omer. Now, the word Omer is one more time in Chumash and Devarim, in chapter 24, verse 19. He says, you can't forget that because it's called Shichacha. It says, when you're harvesting your grain, okay, V'shachachta Omer basadeh, don't go back, leave it for Leibtag v'lager. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt, and that's why I took you out of Egypt.
Right.
To remember how to treat the less fortunate. Don't do what Egypt did to you. So that word Omer is 3 times in Chumash with the manna, in Tzfirat Omer, in Parshat Emor, and in Devarim 1 time. And that's it.
Right.
And then in Megillat Ruth.
Very nice. And all the time is talking about remembering to take only as much as you need for yourself, and for the rest, make sure you take care. Make sure others have what they need.
It's called wealth management.
Nice.
You need to hoard, but hoard as much as you need,
mm-hmm.
and allocate for those. But even when you need to hoard, always make sure that there's always for others as well.
Very nice.
And it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who have a beautiful custom that when they study Torah in the morning, they quote a Mishnah. Remember, they lasok v'divrei Torah, and they quote from a Sechet Peah. Elu dvarim she'en lehem shiur. These are things that have no minimum requirement.
Right.
Peah.
Mm-hmm.
What's Peah? How much of your field do you leave over for the poor?
Right.
What's God say? I can't quantify charity. You follow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It's a way you decide.
Mm-hmm.
Called Jewish guilt. But certain things you can't quantify them,
right.
because it's a way of life, and therefore you're surrounded. Leave over part of your field when you're harvesting the bundles. If something falls, leave it over. If a bundle falls, leave that over. Always have in mind in every step of your process. Always have in mind there's other people who might need you.
Amazing.
And then how to apply that in a non-agricultural society. That's what education is about. It's how you take that way of life and apply it if you're whatever business you're in. Mm-hmm. High tech, low tech. It's how do you take God's blessings and not just say thank you to God for what you achieved, but to act thank you.
Very nice. Very nice. Wonderful. So may we all learn from this to not just act thank you, so not just say thank you, but act thank you. And thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, and wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom.